purpose of last night was to walk from darkness into light, and we're just beginning to see a little bit of light now. And the whole idea was that people can move from despair into hope. And the way people move from despair into hope is by people like you, and people like me, and people like Chris, and like Wolfie, who become listeners. I just want to tell you a little story about me, because I'm passionate about this. Maybe about 4.5 years ago, I was sat in the grill on the square, so that lovely restaurant that does strange meals for £15 a night on a Wednesday now. But a few years ago, it was really nice, and two of my friends who didn't know each other had got to know each other through Facebook. And the reason they'd got to know each other through Facebook was because they were concerned about me. They didn't like a lot of what they saw as my erratic, chaotic, perhaps dangerous behaviour. And they started talking to each other as friends through Facebook and saying things like, "Do you think Ian's okay?" And I know, because I've had the conversation since, the first few conversations were, "That's just Ian, he's going to be fine, he'll be okay, sometimes he goes off on one for a bit." But eventually something just clicked in their head that they realised needed to have a crucial or an important conversation with me. So I turned up at the grill on the square just expecting to meet one friend, and I met two who didn't know each other, and I sat there and the two of them took a gamble, because it is a gamble. The two of them took a gamble and said, "Ian, we're worried about you." And of course, as a typical bloke, what I said was, "You don't need to worry about me, I'm fine, I'll go on holiday, I'll do this, I'll have a pint, I'll take some time off work." And the two of them persisted and said, "No, there's something wrong." And they gave examples of why my behaviour was different. Small examples where I was self-employed. Yeah, small examples where I took time off work when I should have been in work. Small examples when I was ratty with people when I didn't need to be ratty. When probably I drank too much stuff and I did stupid things like book holidays to Southeast Asia. And you know what? What happened that day in Grill on the Square? No miracle happened. My mental health was deteriorating. Eventually I got sectioned. I ended up spending 4.5 months in a psychiatric unit. But what happened that day was just that slight turning point where they took me from despair, because I knew my life was chaos. I knew every time I left that office at 10 o'clock at night and I stopped in Lime Street Station and had a beer, I knew I was turning the screws on my own life. I was beginning to destroy myself. You don't get put in you don't get sectioned for any other reason than you're a risk to your own life or you're a risk to someone else's life. So that was the reason I ended up getting sectioned. But what I had, even in that period of time in hospital, I had this memory of two friends saying to me, "We're concerned about you, we're worried about you, we want you to do something with your behaviour that gets you to a better place, that takes you from darkness and takes you to light." And I call these people accidental listeners, because they're not psychiatrists. I saw enough of them, I saw enough psychologists, I saw enough counsellors, but these were the accidental people that I bump into every day who have an opportunity to look at my face and say, "That ain't quite the way it normally is." And that's, I guess, part of what Movement and Warrington Cares and the other organisations in Warrington are trying to do, to get us as a town of 232,000 people to start looking at each other and having, I think Andrea's there, having what are called crucial conversations, conversations that save lives. That's a gamble. That's a gamble, because every time I turn to Chris or James and say, "James, you don't look right today," there's a risk, because the risk could be they shun me, they tell me where to go, they get aggressive with me, but ultimately that risk saves lives. So what you've done tonight for us guys, and I'd like you to clap your own hands to yourselves, you know, you started to do that, you started to have these conversations that potentially can save those 14 lives a year in Warrington of the people who die. You know, those 94, it's on the back of your things, the 94 people a week, blokes, who die in this country. You know, the 6,500 people who die a year. So that's what we're asking you to do, to go away from here and next Wednesday afternoon, think, how can I be more compassionate? How can I be more empathic? And how can I be a greater listener to the person who's next to me? How can I suspend my judgment just to understand a little bit of what's going on in their world? So I'd just like you to clap yourselves, guys, because you're phenomenal.